Hello and welcome today to our third web chat in our series on corporate treasury in crisis. We have Alex Fleischmann, who's been with us many times, Head of International Development at TIPCO, who is going to talk about the opportunities for corporate treasurers to improve their productivity and resilience in this crisis. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Jack. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again.
You focused on the weak spots that have surfaced in COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, this is from your experience, TIPCO's experience with corporate treasury departments around the world. By the way, how many treasury departments do you cover?
At the moment, we have more than 130 clients.
So you're well experienced in what's going on in the corporate treasury department. So what would you say about these 2 points? Why have they come up?
Maybe to provide a bit of background, of course, since the entire Corona or COVID situation started to unfold back in March, we have seen enormous interest in our tried and tested cash flow forecasting solution. And there has already been plenty of discussion in the last couple of weeks about how important safeguarding liquidity is and the tools and processes required to forecast liquidity and all of that. But the items we see here, what we also found during the last couple of weeks, is that the treasurers we work with actually also faced additional challenges which they did not really anticipate before everything sort of started to unfold, and which related, for one, to their IT infrastructure, but also to the way their various treasury processes had been set up to date. If we look at the first item, some of our clients found that core treasury systems were either fully or partially down, or at least inaccessible for at least some of their staff. To give you a concrete example, one of our clients found that from one day to the next, they could not log into our treasury information platform, which they previously had decided to host themselves, to host on-premise. And this was due to some minor issues, some server-related issue, and the lack of resources on the side of the IT department to quickly identify the problem and fix it. So for a few days, until everything was again up and running properly, they were in a very tough spot because they rely on our tool for their cash visibility and their cash flow forecasting. And right now, we are talking about moving their system to our data center to actually do the hosting for them to avoid similar situations in the future. And the other item relating to treasury processes is that some treasurers told us that what used to work okay, while you could still get a hold of people in the office, turned out to not work too well with everybody working from home, especially processes that are heavily relying, as I put it here, on wet signatures. They got stuck somewhere in between because a signature was required, because people were not always readily available, and these processes started or turned out to actually take longer than usual and longer than desired.
And that's a common feature across the treasury world. I've heard many stories of people having problem with the wet signatures and authorization across the different people involved in supply chains and so on.
Yeah.
So if you bring these together, you produced I rather like this, treasurer's post-corona to-do bucket list, because these are really quite significant problems.
Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, what we think is that once the worst is over, so to speak, once liquidity is ensured and sufficient financing is in place, and our take or our hope, if you want, is that treasurers will ask themselves, okay, which processes do we need to redesign because they did not work as well as they should have, for example, and what does that mean for our system infrastructure, the IT infrastructure on which these processes rely. So if we look at item number one, we would advise the treasurers out there to, again, if they have not done so in the past, consider moving to the cloud. Of course, this is always provided that the respective solution provider is also financially safe and sound. So you can actually trust that they will still be around next year, and also provided that they have the relevant certifications relating to data security, etc. But more and more of our clients now value the added benefit of simply not having to worry about server setup, maintenance, thinking about disaster recovery. So what if, you know, a storm or a flood comes or a fire happens in the server room and everything is down? All of these things. Not having to think about ensuring all the necessary software and hardware updates are always performed in time. With a cloud-based solution, the client can simply rely, or should be able to rely, on all of this happening automatically in the background.
But that's the issue, isn't it? Is how can you be sure you can rely on all of it being done in the background?
Yeah, this is exactly what I meant when I said earlier that it's of course important to have all the relevant certifications in place. Like we at TIPCO, for example, we are ISO certified when it comes to data and information security and the entire hosting process. And there are additional relevant certifications that should be in place. And then, of course, the data center should fulfill all the important, you know, access restrictions and data recovery and disaster recovery procedures, etc. So there's definitely a separate to-do list or a separate checklist to apply when thinking about moving to the cloud. But still, by and large, I would say it definitely pays off to consider that instead of an on-premise solution that is also not for free. Then looking at item number 2, what do I mean by that? Do the maths on cloud versus on-premise costs. What we found in the past, and I think this might also change now when we look to the future, is that when weighing the pros and cons of cloud-based versus on-premise, in the past we found that there was not always a like-for-like comparison performed by the treasurers, but also by their IT colleagues, especially looking at the cost side. Because sometimes the initial impression may be, okay, this cloud solution is actually more expensive than what my IT guys cost me. But then the question is really, do you factor in everything you get from a cloud-based solution? For example, what about disaster recovery? A proper cloud provider will have basically a duplicate data center in place to which they can immediately switch within typically a couple of minutes in case everything happens. And very rarely from our experience do you have the same type of security, the same type of data protection present in on-premise solutions. Of course, you know, the very big multinational corporates out there, they may well have separate data centers located some kilometers away from one another. But when it comes to relatively smaller corporates, the question is actually, what do I get in the cloud? And what do I get when I have my IT colleagues take care of everything?
Okay, so on point 3, the resilience, this is critically important, isn't it?
Absolutely, and critically is a very good word to start talking about this, because what our advice would be after the COVID situation hopefully comes to an end soon, or at least things get even more back to normal than is already the case. My advice would really be to take a critical look at what went well and what went wrong in the last couple of weeks, or what did not go as well as expected. For example, if you think about subsidiary requests for intercompany financing, or subsidiary requesting a new bank account, a new guarantee, or any requests to change existing items, existing accounts, existing guarantees, existing authorized signatories on bank accounts, etc. Where did a process take longer to complete due to COVID, due to people working from home, etc., and why? And is that something that could be avoided next time if there was a better, more capable system support in place? That's really what we mean by that. Yeah.
Do you have a checklist here about the resilience of Treasury processes?
We're actually creating something right now, sort of a post-corona resilience checklist for treasurers from a technology provider point of view. And we will make that available via CTMfile in the near future.
Good.
Yeah, and that's basically items 3 and 4 already, because once this evaluation was done, the next question is, how can we look out for, or can we look out for more suitable, capable, workflow-based system support? And this is something we at TIPCO, for example, can offer for the various Treasury processes.
So we're going to look at a concrete example next, which is an important one, I feel.
Yeah, first of all, I propose let's just take a quick look or give a quick overview of what potential processes we could support using a workflow-based, more digital approach. If we look at guarantee management, for example, we now support about a dozen clients of ours with our TIP guarantee management workflows. You have to imagine these are treasurers that used to manage hundreds, if not thousands, of internal and external guarantees using either Excel spreadsheets or in-house developed tools, or sometimes a TMS not really designed for the job. And these guys, using TIP now, are able to manage and track the entire guarantee lifecycle in their web-based platform. They can collaborate around requests and approvals. Everybody knows about the items they need to take a look at and the relevant deadlines, and they are able to replace, and that's probably also one of the most important things here, they are able to replace bank-specific guarantee request forms with a uniform system-generated form, which can now even be signed with a qualified digital signature. This is what we put at the very bottom here, which we set up via an API linked to DocuSign. This is something we've recently added to our platform.
It's also something that Deutsche Bank were mentioning, not necessarily DocuSign, but the ability to get new signatures formally approved without having to go through any of the paper processes. It's happening right across the world. Citibank has similarly, and so on.
Yeah, and it's definitely another topic that will get a push, I think, by the current COVID situation, because this option of putting a qualified digital signature on any type of form or contract that is being created in the workflow is a huge benefit. Also, when you think about other areas, intercompany financing, to name only one. When a subsidiary requests a new intercompany loan from Group Treasury, at the end of the day, somebody will need to sign the internal contract document. Why not do it with a digital signature online instead of sending back and forth forms and waiting for a wet signature? And also, to provide a very last example for now, in bank account management, where a lot of processes are still managed by sending emails back and forth, or also filling out bank-specific forms. If a bank is not yet ready to process EBAM files, XML-based electronic files that we can create from within the workflow relating to bank account management, maybe the bank is already willing to accept a digitally signed unified form. So again, similar topics across these various key treasury processes, and really any treasury process that requires input and approvals, collaboration by various people, maybe even across different departments involving different systems, can be supported in a very good way with such digital workflows that we provide in TIP.
Now we're going to look through a concrete example.
Just a quick look to give you a very concrete example looking at guarantee management, where to date emails are exchanged. The idea is a subsidiary user logs in and directly captures the request for a new internal or external guarantee in the tool, in TIP. A group treasury user, step number 2, reviews the request, defines the guarantors, provides additional information, and then approves it. And once approved, the requests are forwarded to the bank, either in fully electronic form in dedicated Swift formats used for that purpose, or via email in a unified form. The bank looks at the request, generates the certificate, and confirms it. The beneficiary receives the original. Group Treasury receives the confirmation, again optimally via an electronic file. Another Group Treasury user reviews the details, finalizes the guarantees in the system, and that's basically a very, very quick look at this initial guarantee request process, where we went from email back and forth, email chaos, to a full audit trail in the system of who did what at what point in time. And then, of course, last but not least, reporting can be generated based on all the data in the system, relevant for accounting, relevant for Group Treasury, and the subsidiaries out there.
There's always the question of what's the most important part of this workflow process that corporate treasury departments say that's the most important?
I think by and large, the key thing is that from start to finish, if you set up a process in this way, including all the requests, the approvals, the signatures, the forms generated, from start to finish, all information is available for everybody in one spot, including all relevant deadlines, including a full audit trail from start to finish. So information is not spread across different spreadsheets and email inboxes and Outlook calendar entries to remind people of when they need to do the next step. It's all in one tool, accessible to everybody.
Impressive stuff. And finally, before we close, I'd like to ask you, what's your key takeaway about the COVID-19 crisis in terms system terms, in terms of implications for the corporate treasury department?
I think what the COVID-19 situation has shown once and for all is that there are significant benefits to be gained by, let's say, further digitizing treasury processes, treasury workflows. And in order to do that and make the most of it in terms of resilient treasury processes, you need to be supported by a resilient infrastructure as well. And here, in many cases, cloud solutions can provide significantly more resilience than some on-premise solutions can do at the moment.
I agree with that. And my take would be that this COVID crisis has shown that the suppliers to the corporate treasury department become even more vital, and their resilience is absolutely key to the future of the corporate treasury department. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Jack.